Bryn, do you want to come up? I think, are you the presenter of your budget? Yeah. Okay.
Mine or a budget of somebody else?
I don't know.
Mine, thank you.
Yeah, I would think it was cannabis.
No, but yeah, same cannabis.
Well, no, it's actually sin.
Oh, sin.
I have a liquor lottery and.
Yeah.
Everything you do,
Everything.
you try to.
L&L, you're the L&L guy.
Sin and up the sports gambling.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's where our big money is.
Okay,
Oh, at least it's the growth.
so welcome, Bryn, in your current capacity. Won't be long before we'll see you in your new capacity. So obviously your budget, we like it because you generate revenues. Yeah, so if you want to just run through it absolutely. I'm sorry we're late, but please.
No problem at all. And for the record, Bryn Hare, Executive Director of the Cannabis Control Board. I did want to introduce a couple of staff members that I have with me today, just so you can get to know them. Olga Fitch is the Cannabis Control Board's Director of Operations, and Karen Schickerly is the Financial Management. So they've generously agreed to come with me today so they can correct me if I say anything incorrect. I did share with the committee a PDF of just a few slides. And the slides have a snapshot of the roll-up report. So I thought I would go through the roll-up report. I've also sent the detailed report if you'd all prefer to go through at that.
No, we would probably not.
Okay.
We'd leave that up to the house.
Yeah, that's what I suspected.
Yeah. Totally visit.
So I'll start with page 3, which is the first page. That's just a snapshot of the roll-up report. And go through that with you. So we've got salaries and wages is 1.9, that number 1.9, and then FY25 governor's recommends. So that number reflects 22 of the 25 authorized positions that the legislature has granted to the Cannabis Control Board. The 3 positions that it doesn't include are the 3 lab positions that were authorized last year in the budget adjustment bill. At the time we submitted the budget, those 3 positions hadn't yet been created by HR. So they didn't wind up, those codes didn't wind up going into the budget. So that 350,000 is what we estimated for those 3 positions. And you'll see that 350,000 allocated in the other personal services, a few lines down. So it is accounted for in the total personal services, it's just not in the salaries and wages section right now. It will be next year. And then the other thing that is not included in this, and the numbers you see here are the 2 additional compliance positions.
Oh, then we just, once the BAA.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, but the 350 is,
Yeah.
I'm just you pointed out from that.
Yeah, exactly.
So the funding for the positions need to be reflected then in our final appropriation.
Exactly. Yes. And that is 200 and we're estimating about 204,000 annually for those 2 additional compliance positions that are in the so that would be an increase to the base budget. So I'll just skip down to fringe benefits, where you'll see a 13% increase there. That's just consistent with the increase in the number of authorized positions to the board. The contracted and third-party service number that you see there.
Quite a big.
Yes, that there is an increase. Actually, there's a decrease
No,
there
that's
from last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good size one.
Yeah, so
It's IT, it's probably all projects done.
exactly right. So there was 1.4 million included there for phase 2 of our IT project, which is our licensing portal, which we are expanding to include compliance tracking, appeals tracking. So that has been moved out of this category, and it's really a correction in coding to IT services. So you'll see that down below in IT telecom services and equipment and the operating expenses, a significant increase there because we've just recoded that money down there. So I can talk about what else is included in that contracted third party service number if you like. So I will. So 7 VSA 843 gives the board the authority to contract with a consultant to carry out the duties associated with our mandate for the campus chapter. The board has a long list of things that they would like to contract with a consultant to study, including evaluating models to support small businesses. That would include how to support them through weather impacts, like flood resiliency after we saw some impacts to the flooding this summer. Updating our supply and demand model to account for how the illicit market demand has changed since adult use has opened.
Kind of interesting, isn't it? I mean, in terms of what might be happening there
Yeah,
and pricing,
exactly. And also to understand,
how do you find out what's happening with the illicit market?
so that
Most, by virtue of it being illicit.
that's why we would really need to contract with a consultant to help us understand that. We don't, I have the in-house expertise to really do modeling about the illicit market.
well, I can tell you,
Okay, all good.
I'll talk to certain people.
That's what she said.
I have a couple of contacts that I can chat with.
Not sure it'll be scientific and data driven.
Right, it's not as data driven as your information.
Wow.
I think we're losing considerable, for two reasons. One is tax. What I'm understanding is tax and, gas.
The cap in particular, I think.
It is costing us, and I also know that at least in Bennington County, we're losing, according to certain people, we're losing kids from college age to Massachusetts who are purchasing down there because of the lower tax.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so there's that.
I realize it's anecdotal, but you can pay me as a consultant for that.
Well, I was just wondering if that, maybe that.
Save your money, you got the answer.
But,
It's a cross-border issue. People,
really is.
you know, for those of
It-
us who are on the border,
it-
you can do anything you want,
Yep.
but you're gonna get it. And you're gonna do it at
it's
the,
it's a great point, because whether it's plastic bottles or, you know,
But not for the.
I don't wanna step on any toes about bottles.
not for New Hampshire. Tourism, also people.
Well, no, not the cannabis, but Massachusetts we're losing, and we will lose to New York.
And we
as
see it
they-
with liquor, we do it with liquor as
Yeah.
well, cigarettes, I'm sure, so. All right, well, we'll get back into the little stage Vermont in your, in terms of what you're going to use your contracting capability or authority to do.
Yes, so that's included there. Also, what's included is $55,000 for our NIC fee payment processing, so people can use a credit card and not pay fees. $50,000 for ongoing appellate officer services. Statute requires that we contract with an appellate officer to oversee any appeals from final decisions of the board. Also, we have $100,000 for our visual vault system, which is our vendor that manages the database for our medical cannabis program. And then some money in there for rules. So that's what's included there. I'll drop down now to the operating expenses and talk a little bit more about IT and telecom services. As I mentioned before, you see the increase there, which reflects sort of the incorrect coding from the FY 24 budget. That 1.4 million was moved from contracted services to this section. And it includes 900,000 for phase 2 of our compliance and enforcement tracking and our appeals docket. That phase 2 project is also going to allow for product registration portal enhancements. So we will have a forward-facing, public-facing portal where people can look up every registered cannabis product in the state. And I will also do some cleanup of our licensing portal. Let's see, I'll move down to other operating expenses. You see a decrease there. That's where we formerly coded the NIC expenses, that fee payment processing expense. So that was another correction in our coding. Other rental expenses you see has increased a little bit, and that's due to an increase in cost for our fleet vehicles because we have some additional compliance staff who all use fleet vehicles. Other purchase services, there's an increase here, and I can speak to that. A number of things here, an increase in postage for mailing of enforcement actions via certified mail. All of our enforcement compliance and enforcement actions go out through certified mail. We also have a $20,000 increase here, for moving state agencies. If you remember, I talked last year about how our office space was, a little cramped and we had to move into a larger space due to our growth. And so that reflects, the cost for us to move into our new space. And also our medical, services contracts are coded here. I'm sorry, lab services contracts. So this is right now, we do our lab testing through contracts with the 2 state licensed testing labs. So $50,000 here is for us to continue to do that testing
Until you get your own.
until we get our own lab. Okay.
Yeah, we obviously,
Yeah.
recognize the need to do that.
Yeah.
After we had the press around some contaminants.
Once the budget adjustment sells, then you'll know what you have for additional compliance officers
Yeah, so that's right.
and other positions.
Yes, that's correct.
There are only 2 that,
Two
Right. Well, there was-
positions and budget adjustment.
I think there were 2, but wasn't there was an opening too?
Yes, there
we
is.
thought there were 3, but we went back and.
Yeah, no, it was really 2, but there was an opening that on the current.
And the current staff.
Yes, we have that's right. We're in recruitment right now for compliance directors.
And the other thing that we did, is add the language in the BAA saying the position does not require
Yes,
being an attorney. So
Thank you for dealing with
that's
that.
in the BAA as well.
I do have a question about the
Yes.
banking and the ability, when we were doing this is one of the issues that obviously came up frequently was inability to do banking. And my understanding is that the current stores have to be all cash. Although they have ATMs in the stores.
Oh, you can't use a credit card to buy.
Right, but
Cannabis?
now, right, you can't use a credit
I
card.
have nothing.
And now you've got tremendous amounts of cash stored in these stores. And what is being done to protect, I mean, obviously, we're in a day and age where but I thought that was something that the credit unions had offered to take over.
Yeah, so we do require that retail establishments establish a bank account. They are not allowed to be cash only businesses. They have to have a bank account. So all of the cash that they intake has to go into their bank account. And as you noted, the credit unions, the non-federally insured banks are participating willingly in the cannabis market in the state. There are additional banks that are sort of coming online as more and more states legalize adult use. Banks are becoming more and more comfortable with participating in the market. So the bank accounts,
So it's just the customer who has to use cash.
right, so that's right.
And then they have to pay the fee on the ATM.
That's right, yes.
That's nicely put right next to it.
Well, unless you go to your own bank ATM and.
Well, I understand you get the cash
Yeah.
before you go in, but I'm not sure that people from out of state would know that they're gonna have to pay cash.
Yeah, that's right.
I believe what, your 50% of your sales are out of state.
I think it's getting close to that, yeah. So it is a concern, and as you probably are aware, there have been other states where there have been holdups in
Yeah.
cannabis establishments. We haven't seen that here yet. We hope not to, but it's certainly a problem in every adult use state. But there really are safety concerns with retail establishments.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing the out of state. Which is what we kind of projected, if you remember back when we were on that. Conference committee, and the House didn't believe us.
Well, now you're on record that you had it
Yeah.
right.
We had it, of course we. Ginny and I wouldn't mess up.
So a couple more lines here. We've got the property rental increase. Increase here is due to our new lease office space, so our new annual rent of $182,000. And just as a reminder, we needed additional space due to the staff growth of the first 2 years of our lifespan. And that number also includes our projected fee for our lab space. So that's incorporated in the total fee for space there.
And your lab will be,
We are still in negotiation, or we are still working with BGS to secure our lab space. It's our hope that it will be at Vail, but, the lab at Randolph Center, the agriculture lab. Our hope that that's where we will land.
wasn't there an issue around needing to be segregated because of the nature of,
Yes,
because of some of the legal issues?
yes, that lab, the Vail lab has an isolated space within the lab that has its own, access point from the outside.
Mhm.
So it had it sort of set up nicely, for a cannabis lab to come in, so we would be able to do all of our, intake directly from the outside. There's some, yeah, additional work that BGF is doing now to identify, the fit up costs for the space. But we're hopeful that that will work out and we will be able to move it to that lab that summer.
And so, revenues to date seem to be ahead of estimates, is that correct?
Yeah, so if you're looking at the last page, page 5, shows our sort of funding, the way our funding is set up. And our excise tax revenue from the first full year, of sales was just under 14 million. That was a little, ahead of what, I think our anticipated numbers were somewhere between 12 and 14, so we were
Pretty close.
right on target, at the high end. And that number may, shift over time as the market matures and also, as other states around us come online, that could also change.
And the fees are on top of that.
The fee- That's right. So the fees right now are, for May through December, so the entire, like, we started issuing licenses in May of 22. Until December of last year, our fee revenue was, just under $400 million. So that reflects a little bit more than about a year and a half of fee revenue.
And does all that go just running?
It does.
So
Yeah.
when you take out the excise tax, is it minus the fees?
Yeah, so anything that we're taking from the excise tax revenue is just to cover the gap between what the fee revenue costs and what our budget is. So right now, that's looking like a little bit over $2 million. To cover the gap there. And as this committee knows, that this is the funding mechanism for almost every other adult use state, because fee revenue is typically not sufficient to cover the costs of the regulation, so a portion of the excise tax revenue is typically dedicated to the overseeing market.
So the study that you talked about would get to the issue that Senator Sheard brought up about pricing. I mean, as you try to do an estimate for revenue in the future, you would look at other states.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, that would be a part of that study.
Is there a 2025 estimate, revenue estimate?
Yeah, so our revenue estimates, the ones that sort of were based on our supply and demand model, are somewhere in between 14 and 18. So there's it's estimated that at least the second year, of being open, there'll be an increase.
All right, so that's,
Yes,
14 to 18, and then sales tax, which came in at 5.8.
yes.
Good call.
What is the estimate?
last page.
I know.
Yeah, but we're talking about
in the
25.
future.
Oh, yeah, and the estimate is that that's gonna go up, sort of similar to about, somewhere between 6 and 8.
Other questions? Chris? No? Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward budget, yeah.
Particularly since, I have to say, as long as, we're not dealing with general fund, which is under so much pressure, under siege, right? So it's nice to have Andy.
On the potency, I'm assuming that the control board doesn't weigh into that.
The on potency caps?
Yeah.
It has been the board's recommendation that the potency caps be lifted, for a variety of
But that would
reasons.
take a statutory change.
Yes, indeed, yes, so it's being proposed in a House bill, so it is our recommendation for legislature.
Say, the only other state in the our area that cap is Connecticut.
The other ones have no cap or is
The
the higher?
other ones have, I believe, none.
That's right. It's only Vermont, Connecticut, I believe, that have in, caps.
So that's another
Cross-border
issue.
issues.
And obviously the legal market doesn't have a cap. Well, no, but it does affect your.
No, I know it, I realize it does, it's different. It's just.
Not kind of, well, I mean,
It's like the illicit market.
Let us put a cap on the illicit market.
Yeah.
yeah, why don't you do that?
Yeah.
See how effective that ban.
If that would be as effective as our other bans on
Yeah.
marijuana. Anyway, those are the two areas that I think, make us less competitive.
Yeah, and I think that would be the subject of a study to understand what the illicit market capture is for the high potency caps, and also what those high potency products look like from the illicit market, how full of residual solvents they are and other toxic.
Yeah.
And it's not clear where the administration is, the Department of Health has come out against it, but.
Well, they were against it anyway,
Right.
so
And
that position hasn't
And I,
changed.
there are many members of the Senate and House that are against
Then
Against lifting the cap, but on the other hand,
Part was down.
it.
So,
Has certain consequences.
Yes. The medical program has been shrinking since the opening of, since before really the opening of the adult.
so
We can.
that mean it cheaper to buy it. If the store is,
Well, there, under medical, you actually you could grow a
Yes.
certain number yourself. You didn't have to purchase it. There was.
yeah, but the
That's what it
medical
does.
part has gone down.
Yes, it has gone down, and I'm not sure if that's a reflection of the pricing or.
Maybe the pricing's come up, so they're growing it at home rather than.
Maybe. It's not an easy plant to grow. I
No.
understand, not that I've ever.
Does require some-
Is it hard?
It's not hard to grow the plant. It's not hard to grow the plant. It's hard to grow the plant to get the product that.
I would just say that certain company called Miracle Grow has become very active in helping people grow.
Well, I am familiar with Miracle Grow, I have to say. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you so much.
So
We,
you can get directions from Miracle Grow and.
on how to grow marijuana? Oh, all right, well, I'm just, right now I'm only
Member of
doing
the
hot
board of
peppers.
directors that you and I both.
Uh-huh. All right. With that said, we're gonna go to a different topic, fish, wildlife, and then forest parks and rec. And so, thank you for being the source of so many emails. Appreciate that.
Well, I'm happy to keep your life interesting, Madam Chair.
Okay.
No, we do appreciate it.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'm doing very well, Senator. Thank you for asking.
All the things that I
Well-
thought.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Soon as we.
Yeah.
Close the door. So.
Please keep the Salisbury fish station open. That was my call.
No, the one.
What?
Fish hatchery at
I
Salisbury.
don't know what you're talking
I
about.
think I got 4 listening just while I was warming up my lunch. I think Senator Gray is the beneficiary of many emails.
The 8 is also driven.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking
So
about.
258,
Yeah,
213,
yeah, all,
fish hatchery.
209.
yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gold.
oh, 209, yeah, you're.
That's my bill.
I have empty.
I've gotten a couple
Will.
ones.
You have.
All right, well,
anything
let's-
about car seats?
No, or sunscreen.
No, that's great. Well, we've taken care of the car seat. That's on it. So now we're gonna move on to fish, wildlife. And the commissioner, nice to see you, and, you have slides that you want us to look at?
I
Probably
should have
do.
been
Do you want them up on the screen?
I think we.
No, we have them. The question is, do you
I
want?
don't need them up there if you don't. It's up to you, Madam Chair.
Well, I think I might. All right,
You're gonna be-
well,
There it is.
Center line, that one goes to Senator Star as well, when you're looking at. The packet. Should be 2.
all right. So, Commissioner will let you, thanks, buddy. Oh my goodness, I'm glad to see you've got your tree.
Tree
here.
card.
tree.
It's got a very sparse tree.
Well,
Well, that, trees are for forested parks, so.
yeah, he's got a.
Thank you.
Rock.
I think you need Miracle Grow. Because your tree seems to be somewhat truncated.
That is a fair statement.
Well, shall we keep going, in terms of your budget overview?
Sure, so for the record, I'm Christopher Herrick, I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we'll go ahead and just, so for today, and anytime you have any questions, please, stop me and make me explain it.
And I'll just point out, obviously, the house has more time to get into maybe more detail on that are smaller, but obviously, our concern is gonna be really relying on you to give us the highlights.
Sure.
Where, where you had to make some tough choices and why you had to do that, and
Yes.
any initiatives that you might have.
Absolutely, so, we'll talk about, the agenda's right there, but I'll go through fairly quickly, I know we have a busy afternoon. So,
Well, you're only holding up your colleague.
I know, they told me to keep it short. Actually, they said, talk about Salisbury for an hour and then we'll get out of here in 5 minutes. So if you look at this page here, we don't have a lot of different areas. And what I can tell you is we look at the fish is the largest single amount, 8,450,000. Then you have the warden service, and wildlife are about the same. The administration, when I was here last time, I think there were questions about why that's so high. That includes land acquisition. I don't get paid nearly that amount. You think I should, but I don't. So that's a lot of what that is. One of the great things that we do at the department is purchase land and rehabilitate it. Whether it's in floodplains, water, a wetland restoration project. And so that's where that gets captured. And then we have our outreach and education.
Do you do that for fish habitat or are you doing it for other wildlife?
Other wildlife. It's more, so a good example is, most recently, like Lemon Fair down in, Addison County. Is former agricultural land, and so they have, for agricultural purposes, have managed the land, not how it was formed by the river and nature. We go back and restore it, and that does a lot of things. It brings back the habitat like it was. It allows for more natural communities to thrive, and it also creates more areas for water to be stored when we have floods.
Yeah.
So it's important work. Any questions about that?
No, so the warden services, so wildlife, which, can you explain wildlife versus warden? Because I tend to think of wardens as protecting and enforcing laws around wildlife, so.
So the
What
wardens,
goes in the wildlife bucket versus the wardens?
right, that's a great question. So the wardens, we have 41 sworn law enforcement officers. And they do all the law enforcement with respect to fish and game violations. We patrol lakes, rivers and ponds, do boat safety inspections, check people for fishing licenses. We also are investigating animal cruelty cases.
Yeah, I know, you're asking for positions to really
Correct.
help support that, workload.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they do just the enforcement and investigative work. And some of that involves undercover work. One of the things that we're very concerned about, and there are bills to this effect, are the illegal trade of amphibians and reptiles, endangered species. And so we do a lot of work with that. We work with federal agencies as well. So they are strictly law enforcement. Although I will say, they do a lot of public ed just because they interact with the public on a regular basis. And I would describe them with all due respect to all law enforcement in the state, they are the best at community policing. Because they know their constituents, they know their areas.
Most of the constituents are, carrying firearms.
Well, oftentimes, so they, you know, you mentioned that we just had training for our non-law enforcement staff on de-escalation. And it was taught by the wardens, because they use it all the time. Because they're often one-on-one with somebody,
And way out in
yeah, in the middle of nowhere, and so they are really, strong. So the difference between that is wildlife we have our small mammal biologists, so we met, you know, ensuring habitat and studies on the little brown bat. We have our fur
what are
bearer.
bats doing?
Well,
Are they coming back?
they're improving. And I can have some information put together by Alyssa, she's brilliant. So we have our fur bearer biologist, the deer and moose biologist. And so they do all that work, but we also have a biodiversity person and folks working on land acquisition. Even though the money comes out of this pot, they're talking about habitat restoration, and they all work together. We have folks that work on data analysis, because pretty much everything we do is based on science. Did that clarify for you?
Yep. Oh, go ahead.
That reminded me, you guys did the bear studies for the wind project?
Correct.
And I think I talked to you back in the last summer about that results. So I just thought I'd check in with you since you're sitting here about when those results would be published.
So the amount of data collected on that is so massive, that we contracted with, I forget which university, I want to say it's Vancouver. And they are crunching the numbers, and we expect to have the results back this late spring or early summer. So when they're in. Great,
Keep going.
okay, so on the next page,
Get to the money.
these are the big buckets, and the one thing I would note. In looking at this page, you should look at the next page too. Because there were a lot of one-times in last year's budget. And so we're not gonna see those this year. So that's just an important point, because it makes it look like the budget only went up that 654,000 in personal services, but it actually went up. The overall went up more than 100,000 if you look at the bottom, because there's is $1.4 million in one times. So a tractor, some other,
But you use
1.5.
your one-time money for one-time purposes.
correct. So, and that was just that.
That's rare. I just to say, nobody else.
Well, I think we have with the budget, been quite vigilant,
Yes,
but other systems perhaps
so,
in the same way, but.
so this gives you kind of the overview, but I think,
So what happened to the Fish and Wildlife Fund? Is that because of one time or?
I mean, so.
I realize I'm skipping down, but
Yeah, so that actually is due to our investments having a negative interest return.
could you say that again?
Time to do man.
Oh,
Financial management.
the investments had negative interest.
You lost money.
We lost money.
So it's not just
But we're not the only ones seeing this.
so it's not just the interest, it's just the market gain of whatever that money is invested in.
Right.
Went down.
Correct. So I asked, should we reinvest it? And the treasurer's office feels like it will come back. So that's what that represents.
But you're using it in your budget? I can understand why if it's a fund and it's being held and being invested, but, are you using, I mean,
This is income from the fund, I assume.
it must be quite a big fund to be generating 10.4
That's what I was.
million.
Well, no, that's the balance of the fund.
And you're spending the balance of the fund?
No, we don't spend the balance.
Well, I guess then I'm having a hard time
Right.
understanding, because normally, it would only, if you're
Okay,
looking at,
I
what
think
you
we're
have
just,
for available
we're
revenue.
showing what we also have, we have to hold some of it. Can't spend it all down.
No, I wouldn't want you to.
Right.
I guess we're mixing.
Right, that would be
Um,
normally like on a balance sheet, not in a budget.
Okay, well, then
Yeah, okay.
just for full, I mean, we're gonna,
Yeah.
full disclosure.
Okay.
I mean, we're pretty open.
And, go ahead,
What, you
what
want
page
to
do you
leave
want?
Salisbury first?
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet. We're
Well, I
still
thought
on,
we were talking about
well, we're not there. I
fish cultures.
was on the fish and
Oh,
wildlife
okay.
fund.
All right.
But,
Then
Well,
I'll wait
you know,
till we get
Senator
to where I-
Sears, I think I'm gonna give you the opening that you're looking for here. on the
Why
No,
next
no, no,
page.
no, I want you to go through what,
Yep, and I think that'll come up
I thought we
now.
were talking about Salisbury.
no,
so that's-
sorry, we can. Why don't we do that?
Although, I still do have a question on that, so if this is your budget, that sheet, and you're saying your expenses are 29 million, right?
Right,
Down below, you're saying that 29 million is coming from the total of those funds.
correct, I think that's pulling out of that fund,
So you are pulling 10 million out of the fund, so it would be a very large fund.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Nick,
No,
oh,
yeah,
yeah,
that's-
I'm here.
do you wanna help out with this?
I'm trying to catch up, Commissioner, sorry, Nick Kramer, Department of Finance and Management for the record. I could follow up with Elizabeth. I think Senator Perch likes to.
I would say it would have to be a huge fund to be generating 10 million a year.
Isn't that where all the license sales go into the Fish and Wildlife Fund?
Yes, I think
Then
that's right.
that's where the license sales all go, so they're taking the license
So
sales
it's
out.
really an operating fund.
It's an operating fund.
All right.
But it's a special fund.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a spend, but it's an operating fund.
No, it's a fund where the proceeds from that particular revenue source are dedicated to a
Correct,
very specific activity of government.
Correct.
That's-
In the old days, that fund funded
The
the whole
entire-
department,
Yeah,
but about
yeah,
20 years ago, it started.
I know.
But could this be just a loss of lower sales of licenses?
that's actually what that represents, and there's a different fund that I was,
Okay.
and I apologize,
Okay.
that's my confusion.
Oh.
So
Number
yes,
of
that,
license issued is down.
that's
And,
correct.
okay,
Okay.
and, equally between anglers and hunters?
You know, I can get a full report on that. One of the things that we experience with fishing licenses is a thing called churn. That we don't see with hunting licenses, where somebody will have a hunt fishing license. And then they won't buy one for 5 years, and then they'll buy one. And so we don't have that every year coming back. And we're actually looking at strategies about how to resolve that, which could include auto renewal. The other thing, and something this would be down the road because of our current vendor wouldn't be able to do it. But making licenses 365 days. So for instance, a lot of people buy their license in August
Um,
and it expires in December.
mhm.
But if I buy my license the 1st of January just because I ice fish. But, they would get the license, if I buy it now,
I hear from,
it would be good for till a year from now. And so we might see less churn and that number would shrink potentially. So we're doing that kind of analysis.
all right,
All right. So the key changes. There are a lot of upward pressures on our budget. The increase of $1.12 million in salaries and benefits. And part of that is COLA, but also FMLA and childcare benefits. We also have an increase of 446,000 for class RFR.
yeah.
And that was for 77 positions, which is roughly half the department. And these were fishery and wildlife biologists.
And the BAA too.
Part of it was because it was retroactive to August.
Yeah.
And we're also covering a portion of that. That doesn't cover the entire up pressure. Some of it we're covering with federal match. I just would say, and I think I said this when I came in for BAA, these positions had not been reviewed in 15 to 20 years. And so it's one of those you pay me now, pay me later kind of things.
Well-
But we want to value the people that we have.
It must be the duties change
They did.
because, that's the only reason you change your classification
That's correct.
under Willard.
They've taken on much more work since 20 years ago. I mean, as you mentioned, license sales were different. So the 299,000 increase is to support. I want to make sure I'm clear about this. It says animal cruelty investigations. It doesn't mean we're hiring a person to be the.
You're hiring a warden and expanding your capability to respond statewide. to
Thank you very
situations.
much.
Including being able to board if you get a dozen horses, so,
Now
that's,
God, I hope we don't have to do that because that'll be the
That's-
entire budget.
That's my question to you,
Okay.
by the way, that. Given our work in Senate Judiciary over the years on animal cruelty. We found, I mean, it's an enormous expense in certain cases. Which you would never expect to have 56 animals of all different varieties. From horses to dogs to cats, etc. And the veterinary bills, a lot of it's pro bono, quite
Yeah.
frankly. But they only can give so much, and you can eat all that 299,000 up in one case
Agreed.
of what we've seen in the state. So I caution us
we haven't solved.
how we're going to. You've got about 3 months, if this goes into effect, you've got about 3 months to figure out what the parameters or rails are around this spending, because you can easily,
So, may I respond?
I mean, there was a bus came over from New Hampshire, stopped in Woodford, Vermont, full of dogs. And they
Let
were
them
all,
loose. Let them loose.
no, he kept them in the bus, but he was hoarding, and he was in Vermont. I mean, it was just a horrible situation a few years
They
ago.
are, animal
But it can
cruelty is
just
just
eat you.
horrible.
And the guy didn't think he was being cruel, he thought he was
He was taking-
saving the animals.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway,
No, I understand. And so the 299,000, the majority of that is actually for the position and the equipment to, get a new warden up to speed. There's a $50,000, amount to cover boarding and vet bills. Now, two things that are important. You make a very good point. We're looking at this past year, so we've taken on these cases. We took them on in 22, September 22, and since then, we have. Up to last week, had 236 cases. The amount of money in the budget that we need for vets for 1 year is less than that 50,000, so that's why that amount is in there right now. This is not the long-term solution, we know that, but it's addressing it better than it was before. There is work going on in the long term to look at what is the long-term solutions, because this is not.
Well, we had a bill introduced, I think both in the House and the Senate, to create a division of animal cruelty. I think it was in public safety.
It is.
And I don't know what's happening with that.
So I testified on that bill along with Dan Batesy, the Deputy Commissioner of Public Safety. That it's well intentioned. But maybe it needs a little bit more work before it sees prime time. So that's why this would at least be a stopgap to get to that.
Many years ago, the town select boards had a role and animal protection, I guess, yeah,
but it's been inconsistent.
Well,
all over the state.
That's right, it's a patchwork,
yeah.
and there's no single authority. I mean, we take a lot of cases but there are some places where a local law enforcement animal, they'll do it. And others are like, no, it's not us, call the wardens. And until we actually have that overall system, but this is to get us get us time to get there. In terms of reductions, it's been a tough year because of these upward pressures. So that 1.4 one time, you know, I just mentioned that again when we look at this, but in terms of budget cuts, I've cut equipment. I specifically cut equipment out of the warden's budget. I've cut equipment out of the other divisions. The replacement of vehicles, I've had to slow the pace for all divisions, including the warden service. That's a problem. But this is how dire it had become. And then that's why I say all that, because the fish hatchery is a part of a suite of cuts that we've made.
And that's 500?
550 some odd thousand per year. And I'd say about 140 of that is operating and the rest
Down.
is correct.
Was it fishing game or forest and parks? A few years ago, we had to bump up their equipment figures. They were riding around all junk pickups and.
Well, I don't know the answer to that, Senator Starr.
No, we put a fence around, on some of the, JCOG transfer to public safety,
Oh.
and required its use for, to keep their,
Yeah,
vehicles.
is that about $21 million?
Yeah.
I think. I used to be a public safety, I remember, that was a great.
The transfer was, 21 million, but I think each year was like, I don't know, 1.2, but it inflated every year. Because, you know, Colonel Baker at the time, wasn't it? Could only fill its gas tank half full because it leaked and we had bungee cords and I don't know, it was a mess. So we've required a certain amount of that transfer to be used for that purpose. Because I ought to remember that when they complain about the transfer. So, okay, well,
So-
going.
So that, yeah, the Salisbury Fish Culture Station was just part of the suite of cuts that we implemented. I also we were giving a grant to the Lake Champlain International Fishing Derby of $30,000. I've zeroed that out as well. This is drastic.
That's advertising. Though.
Well, it is, but they're not happy with it, but who is? But when I explain
You know, I
my budget is, one more thing, I'm sorry.
no,
I
I
also cut on
just want,
seasonal staff.
no, I just wanna reiterate, and I know people are listening, there are not many people in this room. But this committee is very well aware of how difficult this budget has been for the departments. And so, you know, everybody can say they need something,
Mhm.
but we're seeing when you have to say we're taking the 30,000 out or whatever you're having to do. I don't think the physical reality has kind of hit home in this building about how difficult this budget is. And, this is, to me, this is indicative when you're down to, you know, the level of, where you had to go for money to make it work.
I think that's a really poignant statement, and I think it's important that I've had a lot of discussions, as you might imagine, about Salisbury. And I'll get into more why in a little bit, I'm sure. But I'd like to say that it's not a decision that we just said, oh, let's accept Salisbury. As you mentioned, Madam Chair, this is a very difficult budget. And while we want to do everything, my job is to make the hard decisions. It's a very difficult decision. And it wasn't just a willy-nilly thing. We struggled over this, but we also needed to present a balance. But
So, one of the things, of course, the governor would never propose any fee increase. We learned that last year when we increased DMV fees. But we would like to point out the transportation budget would really be in trouble that, had been postponed any longer. So we've heard, well, the anglers would say they'd be willing to pay more on their, fishing license to support it.
Sure.
And I've heard that $5 increase, I don't know what a current license is, but would generate about 400,000. Is that,
I don't know that that's, I'd have to look at that number, but here's the difference. We don't have a captive audience. You raise the fee, some people might say, I'm not buying one this
I'll
year.
go.
I have
I'll
to
go
register
fish
my
in the
car,
Amanuset. Yeah,
right? I mean, so there, we've seen historically, when we raise fees on licenses, there's actually a dip in overall income. And so,
how do we look compared to neighboring states in terms of,
oh,
you don't need to answer.
yeah, that's, I have to
Off the top of
look
your
at
head.
that. But I also did an analysis, well, that's a different question,
Yeah.
so I won't go there.
But I also know that you're dealing with water quality and discharge and.
Well, that's the other-
Replacement for.
There are three pieces to Salisbury.
Did you do an analysis if we raised fees and can you share any of that with us? Because as we're getting inundated by,
Sure.
don't close. the
So let me, that's a,
It will be important for us to be able to answer those.
sure,
And people are only looking at therapy, we're looking at, do we need a functioning judiciary system and deal with the backlog?
Sure.
And, 600,000 or 500,000 for, the anglers and how that all stacks up relative to the priority for
sure.
very limited public funds.
So the answer to your question is, let me back up a little bit and I'll get there, I promise. There are three reasons that we're looking at closing Salisbury. You mentioned the discharge permit, which is, said the current one expires in 27. It's uncertain, very uncertain, if we'll be able to get a new one based on current trends without a major investment. And that major investment, they did a study in 2019 when this issue came up before. It was around 10 to 12 million dollars. That's in 2019 numbers. I don't know, Nick, what would that be now? I think we did this the other day, 16 million, maybe. So we did an analysis. It would have to raise license fees $185 to cover that. So, but that's kind of that's not really the question. And the other piece of this is I have staff down there. And I have PR bump funds, federal funds that are available that if I don't start encumbering in August, I will lose. If I move those staff and they're qualified, I can keep them employed, zero down the cost of the state for their salaries. That's where we see this. But if I don't do it this year, then I won't have that avenue. So if we have to close it in 3 years, then what? So that's why I accelerated it, plus the budget pressures. We have looked at the different fee increases just to see what would happen. What we're actually looking at right now, and this isn't a proposal, but we're looking at not the base license, but the special tags. A bear license, I think it's $5 right now. I mean, make that 20. Looking at turkey, maybe some of the other additional tags. The concern that we have, though, is raising the base almost always shows a decrease in purchases. It's just a concern. How the market works. Did I answer your question? I also just would like to remind, I did send an email, I think,
Yes.
all in, okay.
And I shared it with Senator Ingalls because he was saying, oh, well, he could find the money. And I'm like, well, no, you don't have operating capability. You're, if you want to bond for 10 million to replace it, that's one thing, but the ongoing operating costs are not in the capital bill. So,
Right.
So I'm sure you've been asked to go in there as well. Maybe not.
not into that committee yet, but I've been asked by probably every legislator in the building.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
And I don't mind that. I'm glad to see people are interested in what we do.
Maybe we're trying to convince you not to do what you do.
Well, that's not gonna happen.
Well, first of all, you'd have to find the funding to replace the 500 and whatever, 50 or whatever. So you've got a $500,000 hole in your budget that you'd have to say this is higher priority than, and we're sitting here with, the court says they need 6 million more and the, public defender says he needs at least a couple million more, and the state's attorneys say they need at least 2 million more, and the list goes on. Oh,
5 or 6.
obviously, so,
You,
so the question becomes one of, just what are your priorities and the most compelling, reason, Center Star.
well, if you look at any of these budgets that we're working on, most of it's wages, fringe benefits, things like that. You aren't getting rid of any people.
Well,
I mean, it's just because we close the hatchery doesn't mean you're getting rid of 3 you said down there.
But he's changing it, so it's not on the state dime, under federal.
Well, that's what'll happen immediately, but down the road, we'll have them right back on payroll or something. And you really haven't saved anything, because you dumped it in the wages.
but what's shocking to me when I look at
He doesn't
the
have any
overall
choice, that's all
budget,
negotiated with the
He's
BSEA.
he's
Yeah,
at
but
20,
if you-
total actuals in 2023 were 29,462. His actual budget in 2024 was 29,643 for his budget. 29,643, and his recommended 29,744, which is only $100,000 over the prior year, and he's got we know about a 12% healthcare cost of
I believe it's 27%.
plus 27.
Oh, no, 16, I think.
Yeah.
16.
Yeah, well, it's high anyway.
But yeah, I think I'm.
You're
But it's
probably
only, his budget's only going up 100,000. He's cut operating costs by 475,000, let's say,
Yeah, but
and his budget's only going up 100,000.
what I'm,
I haven't seen any other budget with this level of increase so small.
what I'm saying is, you aren't gonna cut anybody's budget by just closing the hatchery. If you're gonna close the hatchery, you ought to be closing the hatchery and getting rid of those 3 employees because you have no more work for them. And then you're gonna really save money year after year after
Well, a
year.
lot depends on the, federal funding source that's available. And if it's available for, in the, if it's just a year or two, but that's one thing, but if it's an ongoing, support, then it makes sense to be using federal dollars to support this. These are, as you say, these are fairly, scientific positions here.
Yeah, that's on this page,
Yeah,
and so there are 4 positions
yeah,
down
a
there.
forester, a small mammal biologist, so you're absolutely right. I mean, if you were just switching them,
It looks like it was a fish hatchery, not small animals.
What's the job they would take?
that's a job they would take that they.
Oh,
And then when would stay to do
Well,
it?
you have a cure.
One is a
somebody saying-
caretaker, that's correct. There are 4 positions down there. We currently have 3 staff working. So one of the vacant positions would become one of these. And then 2 of those folks would move into 2 of these positions.
And you're down, and you'd be down one then.
And then one would stay on as a caretaker. And that's in the budget, that's in this budget.
So the caretaker's staying, but the other 3 are moving to
They're
some.
getting reassigned.
Right, and it's all non-GF funded. It's a match to draw down PR funds, or it's EPA drawing down, clean water funds.
And where are these people going?
Well,
Where are they gonna be housed? Because we just went through the housing deal with
They're already current employees, so maybe they don't change their,
there in Salisbury. Salisbury's done. So that means they gotta have a new location, I would
but you've got
presume.
offices throughout the state.
And, I mean. A
Are you-
lot of people are working remotely. And, I mean, that's the reality we live in, Senator. But we have an office in places where people can work, in Rutland, Springfield,
You're not
Essex.
planning on moving them a huge distance then from,
We would figure that.
that's all.
That's,
inside.
that's the administrivia that we do on a regular basis.
The money goes into woodpeckers.
You know what?
Money goes into woodpeckers that hammer in my backyard,
Well, whatever.
and wake me up.
I'm gonna suggest that we move on because we haven't gotten to forest parks, recreation and woodpeckers yet, so.
I would just say.
I know, that's why I wanted to get.
Yeah, let's see, I won't bring up woodpeckers
All
anymore
right,
else.
please.
I'll talk to you privately.
Are they affiliated?
Yeah.
I would just say in personnel, when you do the initiative to go into animal cruelty, I really appreciate that you've gone into that because I think we haven't had a plan for a long time, and that's a huge issue.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you. And I will pass that on to the folks who are doing the work. I can tell you that it's a labor intensive job. Each one of these
I
cases.
totally, because these are all cases where people are angry when it happens.
Well, and it's emotionally draining.
No, I remember, at least over 60, 70 years ago, maybe whatever. My father was on the select board, we had a farmer who actually was starving his cattle. And he would just throw the dead carcasses down into the manure pit.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely a horrific situation. It was a horrible situation. At that point, your local
Sure.
select board had to deal with it, but it was, I remember just the impact it has on the people that are
Sure.
going in and seeing these animals, and having to intervene. But it's probably one of the most, well, I would say,
Tragic.
cruelty to children would be.
Well, I agree with that, Stu. If you bear with me for a minute, all the dogs that I have had are rescue dogs. And the current one I have, Lucy the Wonder Dog, was a bait dog down in South Carolina. So they were using her to teach other dogs how to fight. And so when I got her, she was all scarred up but I had her for 6 months and I noticed she was limping, so I took her to the vet and she had to have her knee replaced. They did the x-ray and they said, she has a BB in her leg, right? And I thought, who does that? So it hits home for me, and our folks, they're just great. Let's thank you for recognizing the amazing work that the wardens do, on top of all the great work that they do every day. And I will say this, I have, with all due respect to my colleague next to you, I have the best staff in the state of Vermont. They're dedicated, they're super smart. I'm the dumb one in the department. And I have to sprint just to keep up with these people on a daily basis.
And I also appreciated your comment about community policing, because we do tend not to think about them in that role
Yeah.
and how effective they are.
So I'll just go over this really quickly and then I can.
Oh, I don't know. What else is there?
Oh, it's a state to get significant ongoing initiatives. If you don't want me to, I can leave.
I think we can
I read
just read it. I
Okay,
think we've been reading it, and because 7 years, it's got a long commute, so
yeah.
we're gonna be wrapping up. And I
Okay.
just want to give your colleague, a chance to at least go over the high points for the.
Well, if there's anything I can answer, I can always come back, or I'm in the building a lot and feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate your time and everybody have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll go into FPR. All right, we'll get started. Sorry, we're running a bit behind, but
That's all huge initiatives.
we have your document here, and I'll let you get started, and
Great.
hopefully won't keep you too late to set.
No worries, we figured
Commissioner Herrick went first, we have less time. Zoe. So thanks for having FPR here. Danielle Fitzko for the record, I'm Commissioner of Parks and Recreation. I don't think I have to give you all an introduction on FPR, you know FPR well. No major surprises in our budget this year. Recognizing the time, maybe I'll just share a few things that maybe are a little different this year. I'm not sure what slide it is, but there are two areas that you'll see increases on,
Budget key changes?
Yeah, I think that's probably the one, just recognizing the time we have. You will see a larger increase in our state parks, funds this year for several reasons.
We heard that you were converting as your temporary positions.
And you know this already, yeah.
We got it from the secretary yesterday.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
right.
Um,
You have that, that's one thing, which is really just a sort of re-leveling of our positions, but we also are seeing an increased just use of our special funds. One is just because meeting inflation costs, personnel costs, but one big cost in there that just wanted to make you aware of is that, I don't know if anybody's been to Burton Island, one of our fabulous state parks up in the islands. Well, because of the infrastructure there, we have porta potties, you have septic system, you gotta get firewood back and forth. We're gonna be purchasing a landing craft, which is quite a big amount of money, about $1.2 million, which we'll use special funds.
What is that, like a big barge?
It's like a big barge, we have two, but we had one, it's not working anymore, we've been contracting out, and it hasn't been great service, so we need to invest. We'll get rid of our island ferry, which is our smaller one, and this will move like materials and stuff back and forth and people, so that's one, so that's just to help us operate the parks. Without it, we're not able to.
I thought it was an airplane.
We'll get you out, once we
Well,
get it, we'll be a ride on it.
right.
It is a weird name, I keep saying, can we just call it a boat?
Yeah. Or
I think
vessel.
I'm on this craft that can go onto a beach, is what I think of a landing.
Oh,
Yeah, I like a
Doesn't
hover,
need it.
kinda like.
Well, it doesn't need a
Doesn't
dock.
have, doesn't have the platform that sticks out in front.
Right, it's like a.
Probably,
Yeah.
we get equipment on all of it
Oh,
too.
yeah, like they did on D-Day.
Yeah. Or, yeah, that could,
Like this.
yeah, that would be interesting.
Let's see.
They did an old World War II.
D-Day.
Yeah, terrible.
When you get a tank.
Show me,
You got a picture of
Show her, she's figuring out what to buy.
I think she has a mind.
I love it, yeah, okay, thank you, I needed this too.
It's a garbage truck.
Right. That's the
Well, it's
landing.
probably like a scow. Yeah. All right, well, you've certainly animated the committee here.
Landing mountain. Well, in transportation, we talk a lot about boats and vessels.
We do.
Well, I think you should go over to church.
But yeah, we'd love to talk about landing craft, so.
It's not a way.
Not a big boat.
Oh.
So another big increase you'll see for us is really just a truing up of accounting. We have some federal funds that have already received that we'll be expending for two land conservation projects in the amount of $7.3 million.
That's not chump change, is it?
No, I mean, we do a lot of land.
Rich, huh?
Well, there's two projects, yep, one of them is 3,500 acres, and the other one's about 3,000 acres too.
Wow.
Several parcels there, but we use forest legacy funds with the Forest Service. And they have a lot of money right now, so you'll probably be seeing a lot more land conservation projects coming
That's
through.
great.
Is it 100% federal? So-
That's right, Worcester Woods is here on this one, yeah.
Where's Shattuckwood?
Chattagate, I thought was in New York.
No, these are down
You're
south,
buying land in New York.
Reading,
south?
Stocksbridge, Killington, and Bridgewater. There's five parcels.
Show Rivers House.
Senator Burns.
I just was, so is it 100% federal funds or is there some local or is it state?
There's no cash match, what we use is other conservation projects as match.
Oh.
The land.
Yeah, so we work with our partners and so we're able to do
So
that.
like VHCD when they conserve their land.
We could use VHCB money, but like if the Nature Conservancy or Trust of Public Land acquires another piece of land, we can use that as match as well.
So you're getting quite a lot of land.
Yeah,
I never knew that was
6,000
Shattuckwood.
Not all these will be state parcels, but a lot of them will be easements. So that will monitor, steward, long-term, it will be private land, they'll have an easement on it to make sure that they stay. Natural, but also in many cases, that will be working for us as well.
Do you have staff that does long-term easement observation management?
We do, we just actually, it's new, we've had staff, we just have a new one because of this new federal money coming in that is doing that long-term stewardship easement, which is a lot of work. You have to visit every year to make sure that the landowners are adhering to what's in their easement.
You know,
So it isn't
I mean,
really an acquisition, it is to get an easement, but it isn't to purchase the land.
I drive through Stockbridge twice a week. And all that area. And I've never seen the word Chattaway there, so I'm just surprised at it. And
Learn something new every
I
day.
certainly do. I'll be looking for it on the way home.
Yeah, is there a sign?
If you want a map, I can get you a map where these potential acquisitions, so, and some of these are fee acquisitions that will go to state land. So they're a mix of easement and fee ownership for state lands. Typically, we will acquire, you're bringing into the state portfolio if it's connected to an already existing piece of state land. And it has the sort of stewardship.
But it would conserve over 6,000 acres. Wow, that's.
Yep.
Between the two, yeah.
Between the two.
Yeah, wow.
And several projects are in the pipeline right now because the federal government has, with the IRA funding, $700 million have been put into Forest Legacy. And then land and water conservation funding has gone up with the American Great Outdoors Act a couple of years ago.
Here's a picture of the forest.
Oh, what's the word?
They were whistling.
Okay. And we know, we talked about the positions, moving them for part-time. And the problem you are having, pushing up against your temporary hours.
Yeah, and it's, if you look at our neighboring state of New Hampshire, they have 100 full-time staff and 100 temporary staff. We have like 43 full-time staff, and we bring on 450 seasonal staff, and it's just an enormous amount of effort to train them, recruit, train, we have turnover. So bringing on more professional staff year round will help us extend the season. They'll be able to do a lot of that other behind the scenes operational work in the off season. So we'll hopefully continue to work on level setting a little bit more. And budget neutral, which is great.
Well, our state parks are certainly
Well,
a treasure.
this is our 100th year anniversary. Yeah, we had a celebration here at the State House last week. There'll be events all year long. It's all about telling stories, collecting stories, trying them on.
Well, we had a wonderful article, and I guess it's, and that's the Willoughby, that lake, that's a state park, right?
It is state forest, and so that's another thing I just shared that state parks is picking up for us, is those like high use recreation areas that are outside of like price area, like fee-based areas for state parks, but require a lot of oversight and infrastructure. We just did a whole bunch of improvement at the south end of Willoughby. Now we have better parking, trails, toilets, eventually better toilets are coming in. And then we need staffing, to be honest. And so state parks is picking that up, but they don't bring in revenue for those types of areas. So we did just do a park modernization study, and we think there's some opportunities to like have like kiosks or QR codes at those types of areas for the public to be, you know, if you enjoy this, contribute to the management of it. Because it's an increased cost for us but we have to meet the demands that we're seeing.
Well, what's interesting, we have a monthly newspaper, and they actually had a wonderful article on the ice climbing.
Oh, yeah,
On Mount Pisgah,
yeah,
and, it's world class. It is in, just, you know, on those big, and of course, there are a lot of water comes over and so forth, but it was amazing to think about, you know, here's something world class in terms of the difficulty of the climbing on the ice there. And then over on the other side, Mount Hoare, people are doing backcountry skiing.
oh, yeah,
Which is pretty steep in places, so, so what used to be thought of as more fishing and, you know, summer recreation, in fact, is quite, very well utilized around, which is sort of what you're talking about,
Yeah.
center line.
Right, so it brings to mind, are you responsible for the ski area leases?
We do oversee the ski area leases, right,
So,
7 of those.
So, how frequently are they doing renegotiating?
90 years.
Oh, they're long, like
They're
50 years.
100,
The next one that's up, the
So,
next one is Bromley, is that's up, and that's in 2030.
are they productive enough for us? So we got enough?
We get about $3.5 million, but we are in the process of developing an RFP to audit ski leases and the revenue that comes in, just for some transparency, just because the way passes have changed, they have multi-resort passes, and we just wanna make sure that everybody's reporting same way, and we have transparency, so that process is underway.
There's
They get a cut on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
They're
We want to make
usually-
sure that we're getting the right cut.
They're usually 10% of the lift tickets.
Yeah,
And
there's a
then
formula.
on top of that, they pay the sales tax on
that-
So you get, so every
It's
time
not ticket
Killington
sales,
or
they're
one of
buying
the skiers race.
Certificates too, like the sales and
What's 10% on the concession?
it's 75% or 3%, yeah, it's less, and it's a little different for each one of them, each of these.
It's 3%, so that was the concern, if they're buying like an epic pass,
Exactly.
not the ski lifted, so they might have more skiers, but less revenue.
But so we just wanna make sure
That we're getting.
Yeah. Bromley's good. So that, the other, nothing major for us, we didn't, cuts, we absorbed a lot of the upward pressure through operations. It was pretty thin. Luckily, more federal dollars are coming in, now at least, who knows what happens when sort of that influx of federal dollars starts to dry up. But we've been beneficial getting those. I'm happy to answer any other questions on special initiatives or.
No,
Your wood energy person, that was, you just moved that, you didn't have to create that new position, you combine that with the forest products.
Yeah, so we expanded the scope of the position a little bit more, so it's wood energy and forest product specialist.
Is that federal fund department?
Maybe a little bit, when we bring in some grants, we put them on there, we just got a nice grant from the Northern Borders Regional Commission. But so Molly Willard is our new,
Yeah, she's great.
other questions?
No, but I'll be looking.
Do you have anything to do with the generating?
Please send me the map.
me, right?
Point not today.
We don't have it, I mean, we certainly recognize the value of having, a low grade market and the value of wood energy. We have just reviewed the harvesting guidelines to promote some improvements to that. But I know that there's some conversation going on now about that meeting their efficiency,
Right, the thermal.
Right, question.
yeah.
Yeah,
But that,
so it's pretty important to keep that going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. It's energy security. It's a great market in a rural area for low value wood that needs a market in Vermont.
yeah, it isn't the matter of the plant, it's of the issues around some of the other things, like
Yeah.
the property taxes that weren't paid and the suppliers that didn't get paid. And so you have, so.
Business practices and the value items.
Yeah.
So,
I have a question,
all right, yes,
really quick. And so you've got lands administration here for land acquisition or easement conservation. And then, Fish and Wildlife also has that. I don't know about DEC. Is there interaction with how does that all?
Yeah, DC has very minor land acquisition. FPR has land acquisitions mainly through the Forest Legacy Program, but also we bring in others that will extend our portfolio. And Fish and Wildlife has access to other funding sources, and they're sort of mission driven. Forest and Parks has been looking at making sure that we're maintaining working forests. Recreations is a priority for public access. Fish and Wildlife funding is mostly like, what is the habitat you're trying to provide for wildlife? But we work in concert together, sometimes with opportunities like this may be better for you, who has the right funding source, partner. So we have an oversight team in A&R that looks at land acquisitions together. So everybody's aware. And then we have pretty extensive approval process up to each department, then to the agency level.
You know, one of the comments that I would have about these one-time grants and for, can we put money in? But now I've had people meet and say, well, we can't rely on our volunteer system. And so everybody's talking about the development of trails and whatever. And we're giving out grants to develop more. And all of a sudden, people are just finding that the maintenance and stuff takes a lot of volunteers. Bass has done a great job for a long period of time for trail maintenance, but now it's sort of like, well, we need funding, so, because we can't rely on volunteers, and it just raises a question about when we're putting out grants, what it's the thinking in terms of what it will take to continue to operate them, because I think we focused on giving the money out, but now it's sort of like, well, now we've created it, state, you've supported it. Now help fund the maintenance. And so I don't, and certainly the Trails and Greenways Association
Yeah.
have made a request, and I'm sure they made a request of maybe through you in the budget process.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, we know it's a huge economic driver for the state. We've put a lot of money into, investment into new. Stewardship is so important for existing. And for those motorized like VAX and VASA, they get some money through the registration process where other organizations do not, unless there's membership base.
Right. Like the Green Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get membership on that. And so, we are in the process right now through a planning process called Move Forward Vermont, where we're developing a statewide plan, and stewardship's gonna be key. And hopefully we'll find, we will eventually be, I think, looking for a sustainable funding source that invests in new and economic development, but the key pillar has gotta be stewardship going forward. Because we don't wanna see deteriorating resources that we have. I mean, we see it on state lands too. We get pressured and asked for more and more, but we have the long-term stewards of it and with very little funding to maintain that. And honestly, we have 3 people in our state lands that are full-time recreation specialists for all of our lands. They do a lot.
John Lyons,
I don't wanna hold this up. I can ask my questions when I meet with them, but
they're coming into health and welfare.
I have them in for a visit. Yeah,
Sounds fun.
no, it's fine.
It's what Forest Parks was.
We had fun last time.
Yeah. No,
Recreation, health, and welfare.
Yeah, and
Yeah, for health and all
I get
policies.
sin,
that-
I get sin and you get recreation.
I get the good stuff.
Well, thank you.
Thank
you.
Any questions? No,
Good to visit with you. Reach out anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
So, we are finished our testimony for today, for the week, and so I'm gonna adjourn.